Welcome to Between the Reads, where we shine a spotlight on some of the most talented Black authors in the industry to discuss their works of fiction and the inspirations behind them. Each episode will dive into the rich and diverse world of literature, exploring everything from historical fiction to romance and speculative fiction to YA and beyond. Tune in as we celebrate the voices of Black authors and the power of storytelling. Are you ready, Boos and Bros? Then sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Gin Hammond is an award-winning Harvard University Moscow Art Theater grad, as well as an actor, writer, director, and author of Returning the Bones. She has performed on stage both nationally and internationally and received grants from Allied Arts, Artist Trust, For Culture, the NEA, and others. After a decade of interviews with the main character, her beloved Aunt Bibi, Gin adapted the stories into a Gypsy Rose, Leah Ward, and Gregory Award-nominated play. Gin also works as a voice teacher, dialect coach, and voiceover artist, and is known for her work in video games such as Dota 2, Battletech, Dayton, and State of Decay. Gin is proud co-founder of the Meditations for Actors mobile app. She lives with her husband, son, cat, and chickens in Bellevue, Washington. Gin, welcome to Between the Reads.
Thank you, Audra. So excited to be here.
And I was so nervous reading that, y'all, because as you just heard, with her career in voice acting and coaching, I'm like,
Don't you worry about a thing.
I always read the bio at least once or twice before I go on the show. I read it about 5 times, and I still feel like I just fudged just a little bit there.
I gave you a tongue twister with the word section is kind of wacky. I couldn't figure out how to rewrite that bit so it can be said.
Well, I got through it. Yay!
Yes, you did.
And I see we have something in common, although my last chicken just died. I was a proud chicken owner of 4 chickens for almost 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
During a
Chickens
certain
are
presidency,
smart.
I was
People
really
don't
glad to
realize.
have them. I was like, we may need these
Right?
things. Maybe I've done too many apocalypse
Yeah.
video games, but,
Listen, chickens are wonderful. The eggs are so much better when they are from your own chickens. And they're smart.
Yours
Chickens
may
are very
be.
sad. They have their own personalities.
That's true.
Your chickens
That's
weren't
true.
smart.
No, they have lots of little dumb personalities, but bless their hearts.
Mine were smart.
Opening the
Mine
door,
were all...
going to the door.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like,
Around the door, baby. Around the door.
that's right.
That bless her heart reminds me of that scene in the book where, the one man was just trying so hard and was just asking her all these questions about was Jim Crow a soldier in the army, and she's like, bless your heart.
What is chicken fried steak?
Right? Like, bless your heart. And y'all know, if you're Southern especially, or you've been around Southern people, you know bless your heart can have a whole bunch of different meanings based on the intonation.
It is a panoply
But when they
indeed.
say bless your heart, yeah. But when somebody says bless your heart like that, they're calling you an idiot. Pretty much.
Most of the time, yeah. Now, what do you think about the phrase, I love that for you? I've heard people debate about that. Like, no, I say that sincerely. No, are you kidding? Like that.
Yeah,
What do you
right,
think?
because it can be that, and if you love it, I like it, or if you like it, I love it. Those two, it's like, what do you mean? Like, I love that for you. It's like, I would never do that shit, but if you want to, okay.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah. I had to,
I hate it when people say that.
I got the cynical version of it later, and then I was wondering, how many times have people said that to me? Wait a minute.
Start to
Go
reevaluate
back.
your whole life.
Yes.
Like, all the decisions you made up to that point. Like,
Yes.
think about this for a minute. So we're having fun already. We haven't even
Okay. Chickens and shade. Chickens and shade.
Chickens and Shade. There you go.
That could be a podcast name. I would
episode.
just click on it because I'm like, what does that mean? But I want to know.
Exactly. So, Jen, tell us what Returning the Bones is all about.
Returning the Bones. Briefly. So there's a central set of questions that Returning the Bones asks, which is, how do you choose between your country, your people, and yourself? And in this story, the protagonist, she has her life absolutely prescribed for her, completely laid out. And she's feeling crushed by these responsibilities that she has. And there are certain things that happen that make her feel like she doesn't have the right to rebel, right? And then an opportunity comes up later where she gets to potentially be really selfish and lead a life that she feels like she was deprived of. And that's when that series of questions comes up, and she has to make a grown decision, and it's
right.
These questions come up, I think, for a lot of people, particularly depending on what's going on with their country at that time. Is it a really ugly chapter, a particularly ugly chapter, or not, or what's going on, and do you consider yourself a global citizen or not? What does that mean for different times? Anyway, so many questions come up.
Right.
But those three are the main ones.
Yeah. It's a beautiful book, by the way. And as I shared with her off camera, this book was so divinely appointed. I've been reading all my life. And every once in a while, there's just this magical moment where it's almost like the ancestors are picking books for me to read because they just want me to know about this moment in time. And that happened here with Returning the Bones. I just finished a book, which I will be posting the episode of Staying on Code later today after I get off this show. We read the book Half American, which is about Black people serving in World War II. And I'm working my way through The First Ladies, which is historical fiction about Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune. And all of these people are in all three of these books. And it just, Half American really broke open for me the depth of the things that Black people who served in World War II went through, and really expounded upon what I knew about Jim Crow. First Ladies really breaks open for me, Mary McLeod Bethune's story and Eleanor Roosevelt, because really she was president during that time. Her husband really, to me, didn't do much. I said in the other show that if I saw him, if I could go back in time, I would kick his crutches out from under him. Like the man.
I was straight up racist, yeah.
I just would just kick his crutches out from under him, because the way that he just was not concerned about Black people being lynched and all the things we were going through just really boiled my blood, when his own wife was more concerned about the things that Black people were going through than he was. And then I have your book, and I have BB, and all the things she's going through, and her watching her grow from this young girl into a full, it's really her journey into womanhood and all the things that she deals with. It's just a beautiful collision of stories that I just made everything so rich for me.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I kind of wish I could have been in your brain as you're putting all of those together. That's phenomenal. There were moments where I paused through all three books, and I'm still working my way through the historical fiction one, but there's moments where I've paused and just kind of, you fight back the tears, happy tears and sad tears. Yeah. So you shared a picture with me of the woman the main character is based on, your Aunt BB. And I am saying that right, BB, right? You're right.
Okay.
It's written like the French bebe, but it is BB.
BB. Okay. And then now I'll put that up later in post-production so people watching can see who she is. But tell us about her and how she inspired this book.
Well, I can't tell you everything.
No, you can't tell everything.
But so my family in San Diego, we weren't near any relatives. And I felt by the time I got into my 20s, hey, there's a lot of family history that is not trickling down to me. And we all know how well trickle-down theory works, right? So
Right.
I took it upon myself to reach out to relatives. And this was in the flip phone book 90s, and I was just trying to track people down. I was like, I'm pretty sure they're a relative. Now, hello, and calling them and saying, I'm pretty sure we're related. Can you tell me about? And so, as you might imagine, it wasn't universally welcome. But when I
Probably
reached
got hung
out,
up on a few times, I imagine.
a couple, two, three. But when I reached out to my Aunt Carolyn, otherwise known as my Auntie Baby, subsequently. She was in Shaker Heights at the time, and she said, "Sure, baby, come on out." I'm like, okay, all right. So I got on a plane, and I went out there, and my bar was set for just please let this be a decent human being, and then I got addicted to this. Her graceful presence and her the feeling of acceptance that you got when you were in her presence and little story after little story that got revealed, it's so opposite to what's happening with social media now, where as soon as you brush your teeth, you put it up on social media like, hey, everybody. But it was really a matter of prying these stories out of her and who she associated with and worked with, and what she was doing in the civil rights movement, and all these behind the scenes things too about supporting black banks and other black businesses in the local area, and then learning about my grandfather, who was born like circa 1890, right? So it was a lot of work to see how, for example, he was so emblematic of the dreams of Reconstruction, too. That time when, what was it, about 90 HBCUs cropped up, and him taking advantage of as much as he could, and then trying to bring as many people along with him as possible. And I went to a family reunion only like 3 weeks ago, one that I didn't even know about, because I was hoping for one decent relative, and now woodwork, right? and I one of the relatives, second cousin I talked to, said, "Oh yeah, he had a doctorate of jurisprudence too." I was like, "Wait, he wasn't just a physician and ridiculously good business person? No, he was a lawyer too, and just all of these things." So this guy was incredible, and my aunt was incredible, and I just learned about all of these incredible people within the family, and it can be tempting not to do a deep dive into family, especially if you know about a couple of rotten apples that might be in the barrel. But I think just the fact that any of us here are miracles, right?
Yeah,
and to find out inspiring stories of not only survival, but really that's enough, but also triumph. It's changed my life. And when I was doing this as a play, people were following up with me saying, hey, there was this thing that I wanted to give up fighting for, but because of this story, I decided to keep fighting for it.
Oh.
And it's what kept me sticking with the story, because it was impacting people's lives, and the ripple of her life continued to exist through the people who took on her story. So I was like, I got to write this book too. I mean, I was under pressure to write the book, but also inspired to write the book as well.
Yeah. So she was in your Aunt Bibi was in Texas. Was it Bryan, Texas?
It was Bryan, Texas. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you just got on a plane and flew out.
Yeah, at that time it was Shaker Heights, but I just, just plopped myself, sort of like the family reunion. I'm just going to show up. I don't know anybody, but I'm just going to plop myself there and see what happens. Just be curious.
And she over here got me like trying to fight back the tears, because I see you over there like with the tears, and I'm just, it's such a joyful thing when you know that something that you wrote inspired somebody to keep going.
Yeah.
It's like, that's, if nothing else happened from this, just that moment, because you never know what kind of a ripple that's going to produce from that person fighting for whatever it is that they're fighting for.
Yeah.
And we never know as creatives how the things that we write are going to, or the things that we do are going to affect people. And we may never meet some of the people that they end up having an impact on.
Yeah. Yeah. I had 2 giant surprises in terms of feedback recently. I care. Black readers matter to me the most. I'll just put it out there. But there were 2 people. Right. So one is a young woman who was born in Russia, grew up half of her life here, and she's in this situation now where she's saying, my original country is so messed up. It's doing all of these things, and there's nothing I can do about it. But reading the book, she was already showing up to protests and things, but it just, like she said, I felt seen, and it energized her to, keep trying to fight the good fight, even though she can't see the what the effects of her efforts are going to be right now. Right. And another person, he wrote to me and he said, let me see if I can find it. He said, I am a white Vietnam vet. And he says, this is one of the best journeys I've ever been on. I'm going to miss my mornings with Bibi. Her honesty and introspection have let me look inside myself and touch the pain and rage I've been living with for far too many years. Time will pass and clarity will come. Your work here is beautiful, warm, human. But, I know this guy from the theater, and he was good at rage. He's very good at rage, and to see that this is something that made him helped him process some of that relationship with his country, right? And help her process some of the relationship with her country. It's surprising me who's reaching out.
Yeah. It's just such a poignant book, and with everything that's going on in this country right now, it's just such a heartbreaking, but at moments hilarious. There's moments of humor in there, like when Bibi is in France and this dang fool it just grabs her out on a dance floor, and she manages to break away when he steps on her foot, and then he pulls her back out, and she just she envisions Juan coaching her. She just bops him right in the nose, across the face, and Ella Fitzgerald is on stage and she's singing. She's like, "Daddy girl, that's right, honey," and doesn't break from her singing, and and it was just this wonderful moment. She's like, "This dang fool," and right when she's trying to get back to the bar, he grabs her back, and when I say that I laughed out loud, like tears coming down my face, because I could see the whole thing, and just her fieriness. And another moment you talk about the rage is where Juan was on the football field, and he just said that's where he left it all, and he just knocked the wind out of this one guy, and Bibi runs down on the field, and she's just getting to Howard, and just finding her footing there, and she's running down on the field to basically put into practice all this knowledge
medical
that her
knowledge,
father has imparted to her. And then she's sticking her hand in his chest like, you should be ashamed of yourself, and then she realizes I'm not going to say where she realizes he's from, but it's just, but he's like, Juan is like out there on the field, like smashing. I would not want to play football with Juan, is all I'm saying.
No. Yeah, he's a big feller.
He's a big feller.
And he
with a lot of
needed,
rage.
he needed to smash. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to survive, Yeah, and everything off the field. He had to. Yeah.
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 I just wouldn't want to be playing against his team. That's all I'm going to say.
And not to reveal too much, but Audra, that is actually how they met. That is not fiction. That is history.
Really?
The magical realism part with the snakes, not so much. But that is, she just thought, well, that is not right. And she got up and off those bleachers, crossed that field, forget the game. And she got all up in his face and was giving him what for. And he thought that was divine.
I bet he did. With his handsome self.
And when she said, why did you do that? He actually said, let me know which dormitory you are staying in, and I will explain it to you.
Listen to that accent, y'all. She got it down. And if I was BB, I'd have been like, okay.
So yeah,
it was explain yourself.
But only that.
Only that.
Yeah. It was so much fun. It was so much fun to take her sense of humor and just go to town with it here and there. And it at first it was just I want her humor to be there, but then it was it was revelatory to me how now of course this having privilege helped with this a lot, but being able to see how she did not define herself and my grandfather did not define themselves around the pain of being black, not just during the Jim Crow era, but that's not what was at their core. It helps when you have a full belly, but that was not what was at their core, and it made it so much easier for them to see that the disease of racism was existing in other people, and it did not have to do with anything inherent in them,
Right.
And this dynamic opposition that they were living in. I found that just really inspiring. That, and they were, it wasn't like a full-on Zora Neale Hurston, Eatonville kind of situation where it was everyone in town was greater than the sum of their parts because of how they were together and able to not have a highway put through their town, at least not at that time. But just that there was a clarity around that was so hard to have, and that they were able to do something with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And a side note, I want I want the leverage. Was that real?
Leverage.
Was that real?
Well, I don't know if they had it written down, but I do know that there were white folks who would come knocking on the door in the middle of the night, want my grandfather to treat them for the clap or whatever it is they didn't want people talking about on the operator party line. So he did have leverage, but I love the idea of that manifesting into a physical thing that had power and danger. It's like Lord of the Rings, it was this thing that kept them safe, one of many things. Or like the weird role that passing Aunt Ella played in the family. She could not
believe she's just about the only person I didn't like in this book, other than the Nazis and the Ella got on my nerves.
Right. She could not be more annoying or more important. She's like this brick in this wall, but
couldn't stand her. Couldn't stand her.
Yeah, yeah. And she did make people call her Miss Ella in public. Yeah, that one unfortunately was true.
Me and my militant self, I'd have been like, Aunt Ella. Auntie Ella. Auntie Ella. Hi, Auntie Ella. Out in public, because that's...
Yeah. Yeah.
Go back in time, find her, be like, Aunt Ella, what's up?
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah. Grandma Betty didn't last long there in the house.
Yeah, no, I don't blame her. I knew that wasn't going to go well. I mean, I just knew I was like, this ain't going to last. This ain't going to last. When she packed her bags and left, I was like, yup. Absolutely.
Went back to the reservation. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you touched on so much in this book. We have colorism within the black community. We have Jim Crow. We have the treatment of black people who served in the military. We have the black elite. We have black expatriates in France. The weight of the black race that black people carry on their shoulders. And you wrote about all of these topics, not in an expository dump type of way, but in a way like I felt like I was sitting there with your Aunt Bibi, listening to her tell her story. Tell me what that writing process was like for you.
Well, two things come to mind with that. One is that there was a really good actor in town here who, when I asked him basically, what's your secret? He said, I want the audience to feel like they're smarter than me, and I want the other characters to seem smarter than me. And I was like, oh, I don't like that position. It's very uncomfortable. But it's interesting when you can, it's almost like a horror movie when somebody's thinking, well, maybe I should do this. And you're like, no, don't open the door.
No. He's behind the door.
So with various realizations in this historical fiction coming of age story, I want the readers to go, oh, no, don't think that. That's not quite the and for them to get involved with Bibi in that way. I don't know if the word would be, to be protective of her or what, but even though she was academically a genius, I think we probably all met people who are academically geniuses, but when it came to social awareness or other things, you're like, oh, child. Because it's no fun if she seems perfect and like she's aware of everything all the time, right? And then the other thing was embracing the fact that there is no right answer, and everybody has to discover what works for them, for themselves. If you're going to leave the country and be a black expat, or if you're going to come back and do what you can to hold back the flood, or what, right? But you need to be exposed to the world so that your choice feels like your choice, right? You can't make these decisions in a vacuum, and you need to meet people like the gentleman from Senegal, whose country was colonized, right?
Right.
And there in the book, this is in France too. You have some folks from Cameroon and Senegal and stuff, and Tiwa, and who are reacting all sorts of different ways to their countries being colonized, right? And this gentleman from Senegal says, if you give over to it completely, you will be homeless within your own skin, and that is something to consider, and it's really something to consider as a maybe a Black American whose people have been here since the 1600s. You were kidnapped and colonized and all the rest of it, but But especially if you don't know what has been taken from you, it's a different kind of homelessness within one's own skin. Or her being like, being like, okay, this other character is telling me that I should connect with the motherland, but all I know is Texas and Grandma Betty's reservation.
Right.
I don't feel as African as you say I should. So I don't know what to do with that.
And she definitely didn't after she went into that one salon.
Mm-mm.
If I was her, that would probably have kept me from visiting the continent of Africa for a very long time. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to experience when I go there. I don't want it.
Yeah. But you have to have the capacity to take in the story. You know, these are threshold raising experiences that she has, so she can finally make her way back to herself and see what she needs to do so she can live with herself.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But nobody's choice is wrong in it.
Right. And she makes multiple choices, and she circles back around to choices. You know, she's really grappling with her blackness. You know, while she's there, and with her place in America and her place there in France. You know, and she's, when you're able to step out of the country that you are born in and to look at your country through other people's eyes, I imagine that's an eye-opening experience. I've only been to Jamaica and Canada and Puerto Rico, which is the United States territory, so that's really not kind of the same thing. But I have not, I want to go, I hope to go soon to the motherland. But when you're able, like I said, when you are able to see your country through other people's eyes, firsthand, not from the news, I would imagine that is a paradigm shift of not only your country but your own identity and how you view yourself.
Yeah.
Because when she was there in France, she was just
an American girl.
You know, an American girl studying to be who they thought was a movie star. When she was at the pool, I was like, go back to the pool, baby.
That actually happened too.
Enjoy that moment. Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
she got
I
mobbed
love it.
in Paris because they thought she was Dorothy Dandridge. And you saw from the picture, she's pretty
love
cute.
It.
Yeah.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
Yeah.
And we're speaking in past tense. I assume Aunt BB's not with us anymore. Is she not with us?
No, she's not. She passed away in it was like 2014 or so. She was born in 1925. You know.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, but she had a good long life.
She did, and I'm happy to say that with the decisions she made, her last hours were very peaceful.
Oh, that's good.
And I think that's winning,
good.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just still love that she was just mobbed, and she's, you know, obviously she had a cute little figure because she had on her one piece, but her, you know, people were still just like, they literally swarmed her at the pool.
They literally swarmed her at the pool. And she literally thought they were coming for her, saying she wasn't allowed in the pool.
Right. Right.
But that's not what it was at all.
Not what it was at all. And, you know, that's why I said she was just really grappling. She's like, I'm a human being. Yeah. Like, she was just allowed to be human there.
Yeah.
You know, and I love how she talked about, you know, there she was thought to be a movie star, and they loved her looks. But if that had happened here, they wouldn't be looking at her because of her beauty. They would be looking at her because of her skin color. And, you know, it was just such a defining moment. I feel like that contributed to the choice that she made that we won't reveal, but that contributed to the choice that she made at the end.
Yeah.
When she was
so much to
faced
consider.
with that fork in the road.
Yeah. You know, it's funny what you were saying about international eyes. I was at a voice conference recently, and it was an international voice conference, and there were performances every evening, short performances, and I've been working on a piece called Living Incognito, And for people who are only listening, you know, I'm very passing, ridiculously passing. My brother stole all the melanation. And so there were time after time after time, I had to say, and for our non-American friends, let me explain, you know, because of all of these things that are either a non-issue in their country, or there's just so much history that's woven into certain little things and glances and just the way people are received that just don't occur to people outside the country quite so much, you know. And so it was, but to say, and for our non-American friends, it was also a way of reminding the Americans in the audience, hey, you know, we're not the center of the world. This is not the nexus, and not everybody thinks the way that we do. And yeah, maybe let's check that.
Yeah, well, let's work on that a little bit.
Yes, yes.
So let's talk about Carolyn's family and their wealth.
Yeah.
And as much of their ancestry as you are willing to divulge.
Yeah, yeah. So, once upon a time, basically, there was a person named Eli, I think came from some Scotland, bought some land, 100 or 1,000 acre plantation. Yeah. And then his son, BF, Benjamin Franklin Hammond, and he had a white wife. They were not able to conceive any children together. And he had a concubine. I don't know if anybody's read the piece Wench, but that's an interesting book. But her name was Lucy, and they had 4 children together, I believe. And so this was one of those American paradoxes. He was a Confederate, all the stuff that came with it, but he built a house for Lucy, gave the children his last name, got them educated when it was still illegal to be educated, and had them inherit land. Crazy, right? So it was a luck at the draw thing. Of all, I don't remember how many humans he owned and enslaved, but this was her. Okay. And then my grandfather was able to have awareness, first of all, about the HBCUs and be able to attend it. And it was Meharry for sure. I'm not sure if it's Howard as well. And then, so what he did, he not only became a doctor, but he had all of these businesses. And at that family reunion, I found out about 2 more. Dry cleaners and started a kindergarten. But he did things like, you know, so there was Colored Cemetery because all that was there at the time was the slave field. So he started that. There was Hammond's Handy Sandwich Shop, the Bon Ton Cafe. He started rental houses. But because the whites wouldn't sell him any lumber, he started a lumber company. And if appliances broke and the whites didn't want to fix them, he started an appliance repair company. And it just goes on and on. And so that's what I meant about him taking as many people with him as he could, you know, just starting all of these businesses to create this collective wealth. And he was, you know, head of Negro Chamber of Commerce, local NAACP chapter, all of these things. So it's just crazy, right? And my grandmother and her sister, that's Aunt Prudence, the librarian, they both attended and taught at Prairie View College in College Station, Bryan area. And my grandmother apparently had the sight and was able to see if somebody was about to die. So if she sat up in her bed in the middle of the night and she said, oh, so-and-so, you know, you just knew, okay, this is going to be part of our day tomorrow, you know. And Aunt Gladys, apparently she was a bit of a spitfire. And she inherited the sight as well, but it was always a little off kilter.
Okay.
So, you know, if she dreamed of fire, she'd call all of her siblings. I couldn't include all the siblings in the book, but she was like, make sure that, you know, your fire extinguishers are there and check your wiring, blah, blah, blah. And it'd be her house that would burn down, you know, so.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah,
Like,
and
Gladys,
then
baby, that dream was for you, honey.
oh yes, yes, and then Aunt Ella, who was passing and had this, you know, leverage within the family and the town, which is to say, Auntie Baby just said a little bit about the fact that she might have had a relationship with the white sheriff, but of course they couldn't be together, right?
Okay.
But what was going on behind the scenes. So sometimes if I imagine this as an episodic, you know, how sometimes they'll just really focus in on one person's backstory before they get back to the collective story. I'm like, oh, I would love to see that. And I would love to see them having a torrid affair behind the scenes and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Right.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah. And
I love the way that translated into the book, like the scene where BB and Gladys are in that movie theater and they're forced up onto the third floor where it's hot and sticky and crowded. And when they're like, I can't stay here. Well, BB's like, I can't stay here. And she's coming down and the second level is all nice and cool and there's hardly anybody there. And, you know, this altercation happens and she literally gets thrown out of the movie theater. I love that she was like, I want my daddy to buy this movie theater. And even though he didn't, he had the means. And I love that because this family with their wealth, like when she was in school, when she was a little girl and people would come up to her and say, how come you always have new shoes? And she's like, 'cause I can. You know, I just love that because it wasn't like she was trying to be snarky or elitist. She was just like, because I can.
Yeah.
It's
This
normal.
was my accident
You
of
know,
birth,
like-
and it turned out kind of well.
Right, you know, but she's like, getting new shoes should not be a monumental thing. It's like, this is what we do. You know, and I just love, like, her family and their wealth. They are the epitome of that phrase, I am the hopes and the dreams of the slave. You know? That's just what kept coming back to me as I was reading about the cars. He would just go in and put down a stack of money and buy a car.
Yeah.
I guess those were real too.
That was real, and the movie theater too moment that happened. But yeah, you know, and just what it represented. When I started writing the book, it didn't dawn on me what that really, really meant to have access to a car in the first place, let alone being able to just smack it down and get the prettiest one, you know? Yeah, just walk in there. And just the freedom that represented, you know? And I had a lot of fun. I did some research in was it Brandon? No, San Antonio. I went to a car and train museum because I was thinking about, well, what other kind of cars could he have purchased, and do they still exist? So I was trying to get some of the odd ones that we don't know about anymore. And when he's talking about, you know, a car being a $875 with a hydromatic clutch, you know, that was stuff that I was writing down. And my dad and my grandfather had both worked as Pullman porters, but I wanted to do more research. And so I went to the trains at that museum. And it was so funny because it was just before Halloween. And so I go in there and I'm trying to see, like, what do the ashtrays look like and stuff. But then they'd have this bloody mannequin draped over the seat. Bloody handprints going down the wall. So I'm trying to do my research, you know. See what's what. Get that skeleton out of the way.
Move this aside. I can work here. I love it. So Carolyn has this gift. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
What was that all about? Where did that come from?
So that was inspired by the reality of Aunt Gladys having kind of a skewed sight. And I thought, you know, I love Latin literature and magical realism. So I'm going to take those two things and love child that into her brain and make it so that these things will pop up very often when she's feeling stressed or uncertain, you know. So and who knows how much of it could have been real, right? Like, what if the ghost of Alexander Hamilton did visit her at a particular moment? Or did she really have that interaction with her grandmother Betty, the medicine woman, when she was feeling seasick, where she appears to her as a bear, which is a representative, healing? Did that really happen? I don't think when she saw Alice in Wonderland playing croquet in the middle of a roundabout that was.
No, I don't think that one was real. But if it was, then we need to have some time on the couch and talk it out. Talk it out.
Yes, we do. Okay, let's start with a rabbit. But yeah, so and it just throws her, and she feels kind of crazy at times. But as a grandmother, Betty says, you get stuff figured out here, meaning like, to be a a woo-woo actor type chakra. So third chakra, you get things figured out here, meaning like at the core, the sense of self. Then you're going to get things sorted out here in your brain, right? Can't tell you how to do it. You have to live life for yourself, and things will get sorted out.
Yeah, I just love those moments because like when she was in the church with Mrs. Roosevelt, and everybody's like running, the people in the windows, they're like these,
like cartoons in the windows,
and they're like running from one window to the other, like, ooh. I love that.
And commenting and throwing shade. Your mother wouldn't know what to do.
She getting all kinds of shade. She's like, Lord, and she done forgot what she's supposed to say to Mrs. Roosevelt. She done forgot everything. I just love that. And then the on the door of the club, when she goes to the club and this lion is talking to her, and it's just like,
the
like,
risks. You come in, but what does not advance recedes.
I love it. I love this moment because they come at the most, like you said, when she's the most stressed. That's when it happens for her, and like the bust of was it
Sojourner Truth?
Sojourner Truth in the dorm, and she's sitting there like. Like,
well, what are you gonna do? Oh, leave me alone, Sojourner.
Like for real. Can I get this gift to go away, please? Because I don't need Sojourner judging me right now. Trying to figure this whole thing out.
Yeah.
Don't need that.
Yeah, it keeps it fun. And just the wild imagination. I think especially of an avid reader. I think any avid reader has a superpowered imagination, right?
Absolutely.
And so might as well go with that. Go with that flow because it's all there. We've read so much. There's so many worlds living in our brains and our hearts and our guts. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there is the song Strange Fruit. Now, this was something that I learned. Now, I know the song Strange Fruit. Billie Holiday sings it. But what I did not know is that it was a poem written by a Jewish man. Blew my mind.
Yeah.
And when I saw that in your book, I was like, wait a minute. Got my phone. It was like, Strange Fruit. Written by, and I'm looking, and I was like, I'll be damned.
Yeah.
So without giving too much away, tell us how you revealed this in the book and why it was important to reveal this. Yeah.
One of the parallel tracks happening in the story, or another way to say it is one of the things that gives light to another thing is the way that Jewish history and Black history kind of overlap in places, and how, you know, it's different kinds of persecution, but that persecution has been there consistently over hundreds of years, or, you know, at least as far as we know with the Jews, like 1,000 years, you know. How old is the Bible? And that there are times, too, when we've come together, and when that happens, when we are not, just with all groups of humans, when we are made to not be afraid of each other, if the propaganda isn't shoved down our throat to the other human being, then there's strength that comes from that, and we stand up for each other, you know. And so Abe Mirapol's song, Strange Fruit, his poem, his song, was him giving witness to what he was seeing. I think this was particularly during the time when communism was bringing a lot of Blacks and Jews together, you know. And if you look at Paul Robeson's story, you see that reflected in a big way. You know, he goes all the way to Russia and stays there for a while, right? But yeah, it's a giving witness to what this Jewish artist was seeing when it came to lynchings, and it helped amplify that story and put it in many more people's ears when they wanted to turn away from it. And then, you know, of course, it was further amplified by Billie Holiday's profound performance of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
hearing it in my ears, you know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
And it's so chilling. It's so chilling.
And then it reflects back, too, to what happened with the Jews in World War II. But anyway, yeah.
That is one of...
Oh, go ahead.
That's the most... I think that was one of the most profound moments in the book for me. And, you know, because it ties in with... The reason for the title of the book is revealed through that whole process towards the end there.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
I didn't know until I interviewed my aunt over the course of a decade that there were a lot of Jewish students at Howard. I had no idea. And I didn't know about the quotas.
When that man revealed himself as being a Jew, and she was like, wait a minute, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You're not a light-skinned Black? You're a Jew? And he's like, yeah. Something else I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, because, I mean, I tend to block things out from Howard anyway because I'm a Hampton grad. You know?
Ah, I see.
Hampton people.
Yes.
You know, we have that rival. And my brother went to Howard, and my brother-in-law went to Howard, so we was going to go. But, you know, learning about the quotas and that Jewish people would go to Black colleges, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it was funny because I'd asked my dad when I was a little kid. I saw a picture of people at Howard in the 40s, you know, when the one drop rule was still alive and well, and you could, you know, get strung up for trying to pass. And I said, so there were people who looked like me at Howard? And all he said was, of course there were. Like, you know, I was like I was a wee idiot. And that's all I ever, yeah, that was as far as the discussion went. And so I didn't know about the whole Jewish faction. And then I performed the story as a play here because it was from stage to page. And one of the people comes up to me, an older Jewish woman, she's like, I went to Howard. I'm like, what? Oh, and she just, you know, expounded on that whole thing. Yeah. So it was interesting to me. And it was kind of funny, too, because I remember at my grad school graduation, this was for acting, and there was a showcase, you know, this is when managers and agents show up and everything. And somebody gets brought up to me, and they said they wanted to meet you. And I'm like, hi. And the other person's like, hi. And it was a very awkward conversation. I thought, what was that? And then that person comes up to me and said, oh, yeah, he said he wanted to talk to the person who was like light-skinned black. And it turns out he wanted to speak to one of my other classmates who was Sephardic Jew, who was darker skinned than me. We both had the same hair. And he didn't want to talk to me at all, but he thought that she was black.
Oh, wow.
So it's just so funny, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just blew things. I was like, Jewish people went to Howard. Ain't that something?
Ain't that something? Yeah. It's complicated, right? But we have to be able to hold this complication, you know, so we can process it and do something with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So another powerful quote that I loved in light of today's current happenings is, trying to change the past is self-hatred. Let's just unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. That was one of those things that I heard on some station while driving, so I couldn't write it down. And I didn't want to get in an accident. But I heard that, and I don't know about you, but it still sometimes happens, you know, having these fantasies, at least before I had my child, because I was like, okay, if all of these things hadn't happened exactly the way they happened, then maybe this particular child would have never come into the world. And that really helped alleviate that. But before that, you know, lying awake in bed to think about what if only, and if I could have changed this, and what good does that do anyone? And it really can be a form of self-hatred, because it's saying, like, now is not enough. Now is not right. You didn't do the right thing. You have made mistakes. Maybe you are a mistake. You know, all of those things. And it's a horrible thing. It can be fun, for sure. But if it just pulls you down into the mire, and like so much of the news today, disempowers you, right?
Yes.
And leaves you in a state of kind of learned helplessness, right? That truly is a form of self-hatred, where you're in a state of freeze. You can't do anything, and you know that does nothing but spiral. So it was something that she needed to realize, because she had a lot of guilt as well. Yeah. And that self-forgiveness needed to happen in order for her, just like exposing herself to the world, even if that can be really hard sometimes, in order for her to make her own truthful choices, so that she could have her final moments in peace and actually enjoy life and enjoy the privilege that she had, so that she could also do what her father did and lift people up and take them with her.
Yeah, and I love the conversation that she ended up having with her dad when the opportunity to go to Europe as part of her studies with Howard came up, and she didn't want to, you know, her dad didn't want her to go. And that goes back to what I read in Half American about how black people, when they came back from World War II, they didn't talk about it. And her father did not want her to go to Europe because he was there as a soldier, and he saw all the horrible things there. And instead of telling her that, you know, her mother gets on the phone when, you know, in hushed tones after her husband leaves, and like, listen, your dad was there. And, you know, he does not want you to go. And, you know, because she has this opportunity, and we're not talking like years later. We're talking like the smoke hasn't even cleared from the World War, you know, and it's still very fresh. And, you know, so she's like, your dad doesn't want you to go because he was there during the war, and he was treated horribly. You know, and my grandfather was there in World War II. He was in North Africa, and he never talked about his time in the war, not once. And he married my grandmother, who is Italian, and the only thing we ever heard was that he was not allowed to marry her. It was a fight to marry her because he was black, she was Italian. You know, and that's just such a very real piece of our history, is not talking about it because of the indignities that they suffered and the level of the indignities that they suffered.
Yeah. With him, it was World War One, and yeah, instead of talking about it, he has a tick. He just, you know,
clears
and
his throat. Yeah.
it can't. It's going back to the
It's
chakra
like
thing.
all
You know,
of the
this is where
trauma,
self-expression and all of that lives, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that trauma is stuck in his throat, and he just can't. It's like it literally chokes him.
Chokes
he can't
him.
talk to her about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so that's just a very real thing, and it just carried on World War One, World War Two. You know, and I'm
Total
sure
mirrors.
and I'm sure it happened with the Civil War and, you know, with the American Revolution, because, you know, Black people, especially people who are only one generation removed from slavery, they don't talk about it. Like, I know my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, I believe her grandmother was enslaved. And I say I believe because I only remember her once saying it in passing, and she never talked about it again. You know, so there's that trauma of not talking about that past, because not out of shame for most, but just it's too painful to relive.
Yeah. Survival. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I was so now that I can finally read again, the one that I just finished was Slaves in the Family by Edward Ball. Have you read that one?
Okay. No, I haven't read that one.
So he's white, and he is a descendant of the Balls of South Carolina. And I'm going to go to South Carolina soonish to do a reading at a Black bookstore in Goose Creek, but also want to do lots of research, because that's partly where the Alexander Hamilton connection might lie. But anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So his family, the Balls, owned like 8 plantations at one time. They were the top 3 slave-owning families in all of American history, and one of the people was like the top slave trade, the whole thing. And he's like, I'm just gonna dive in and face that, and I'm sure I have Black relatives. Anyway, so and they took meticulous notes, and so one of the things that I loved reading about were about all of the enslaved people who were trying to fight for the British during the American Revolution, and how that got parsed out with the information that they had. Like, if you have almost no information, you know that at least some of the information coming at you must be bogus. How do you decide who to fight for? I mean, you have nothing to lose. Right, so you gotta choose a side in a way, and just seeing how that played out was kind of fascinating. Anyway, that's another book to put on your list. It's really good.
Yeah. I need to. As if I need another book, Jen.
Well, it's pretty big, so if you need something to hold a whole bunch of other things down in the wind, that's your book.
That's the book.
That's the book.
Got it. So another powerful observation that came from Carolyn towards the end of the book, as she talks about her country, is this love is going to look an awful lot like fighting, but don't mistake it for anything but love. What did it feel like to write that?
That felt like trying to save a family member who has gone astray. That felt like realizing that it's Black folks who have been working the hardest to make the Constitution live up to its potential. I think that really sums it up, that it's hard. That it's hard, and you cannot be myopic. You have to look at the big picture. And one of the most valuable things is having a family that is connected enough that you have an elder who helps you see the big picture and helps you develop that sense of patience like it's a muscle, so that you can keep on keeping on. Yeah, it was hard to write that. Because on any given day when I was writing it, I might have been pissed, I might have been thinking, okay.
Understandable.
Time to move back to, I was living in the Netherlands for a year, and I was like, yeah, going back.
Going back.
And it's always a struggle every day, it's like having somebody in your life that you have to forgive every day. If you can see the potential in that, it helps. And to see the potential of what so many people have died for, including those soldiers, those black soldiers in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and World War I and World War II. It's a struggle.
And the Spanish Civil War, which for black people was the start of World War II for them. Which I learned from reading Half American.
Yeah. So
great book.
Yeah.
Half American, Matthew Delmont. Put that on the list. Excellent book. Oh, y'all, I'm laughing. I'm going to edit it out, but Jen was like, my battery is dead. Can we go to another computer? And she
Total pro. Right here.
So you ain't gonna see it because I'm gonna edit that part out, but I'm gonna leave this part in because it was just, we're over here like trying to keep it together and not laugh, but it's not working. Okay. So Carolyn grapples during the book with living her own life, with living the life that her family wants her to live, and the life that her intended Juan wants her to live. And she says something that's so powerful, that she has to learn the difference between devoting her heart to someone and sacrificing her life to him. And this is written at a time when, well, I'll say she's in a time and place when women were, supposed to go to college to find a husband. And, that's never been her path. Her father's made it very clear what her path is supposed to be. So let's talk about this and why you chose to show this conflict and to have her make this distinction.
Yeah. She had the ability to go to college, which was extraordinary. But you were expected to find your mate there and then just sacrifice your life to the expectations of womanhood. And those things were so diametrically opposed, especially to somebody who's basically a genius. I mean, in addition to growing up in the hospital, she was a junior veterinarian when she was a teenager. That
right.
was true.
Absolutely. Wow.
And I just wanted to clarify that. And Mother's little story, too, when she finally gets off the ranch, right, and is traveling with BB, and she sees her mother in a new light, and she sees her mother get a little fierce for a minute when BB's feeling like we're two free women like Bessie Coleman and Amelia Earhart. She's like, yeah, except we can't, have checking account. We can't do this. We can't vote about that. And let's not even talk about contraception. And long live Eleanor Roosevelt. And all of that. And
she sees her mother as a person and not just her mom.
Yeah. I thought Mom wasn't allowed to take vacations. And just seeing her mother in a new light. And even if something is the right thing to do, if unless that lust, if you will, to do it, if it's not there, it's not gonna. You're gonna burn out. you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And it's crucial. Now, grandfather had a lust for it, right? And that's why he was able to keep going and going and going. But you can't expect the people around you to feel the same way you do. You have to give them time. You have to let them, and you should help them, but see what their place in the world is and why. Does it match up to your expectations? Does it not?
And you have to let them
what
be.
are their gifts?
Just like,
yeah. Or else it's going to turn into a whole lot of sad and angry, and burn out real fast. Yeah.
Yeah. I still would have liked to see her. I would like to see her become a librarian.
Yeah. She stayed an avid reader. She really did. And finding out about going to San Antonio when I was doing that research there, and finding out about my Aunt Prudence, my great Aunt Prudence, she's her own book. The whole thing about, there were stories I couldn't even include, but there's a moment in the book where it talks about her joining arm in arm community members in front of the library and staring down bulldozers. That happened. That didn't happen until the 70s, but I could not let that stay out of the book. I had to sacrifice a lot of stories, but that had to be in there, especially because Bibi's under the impression that to be a librarian means that you're living a tiny
little
sort of
life.
Disconnected life where you get to, live in a fantasy land. Great Aunt Prudence is like, no,
honey.
let me tell you. So one of the stories I couldn't include about Great Aunt Prudence, but which has to be known, is that there in San Antonio, there is the colored auditorium, right? She made sure it stayed chiseled on the side of the building so nobody would forget. And then there's the library, the new library, which I think was built like 50 years ago or something. And so in the auditorium, which was also the library, there would be performances. And she would hear about touring shows, and especially if they were white and European and she was interested in it, she would say, hey, come on down here. We can book you at this theater, because they were less aware, right, of how all of the Jim Crow stuff worked. And but she also would, book, just all sorts of people. And when the mayor did not like her booking white acts at the colored auditorium. And so he was trying to punish her every which way. One of the ways in which he tried to punish her was he fired her, right? But she kept showing up to work. Why? She was Dr. Hammond's sister-in-law. She did not want for anything. So she could keep showing up day after day after day. The mayor appointed some undereducated person to take her place. But who would all of the library patrons go to? They would go to my aunt. They were completely ignoring the other person. And that went on for a couple of years, I think, until the other person just gave up. And then Great Aunt Prudence was reinstated officially. But the mayor was not done. So what he decided to do was never make any repairs to the building so that it could eventually be condemned. And that's when the bulldozers showed up. But that's when it was the whole arm in arm thing. So that's how she worked. She was just always like,
So what it sounds like to me is you need to be writing this next book about Aunt Prudence. This needs to be like the series.
Yeah, I met elders there whom she had read to when they were children, and she made sure every day, Monday through Friday, she read to children after school. And there's still a Prudence Curry society, because she affected so many people. Again, the idea of somebody's life rippling beyond just the dates between birth and death, Yeah. Wow. I want to know so much more about her too, but she was a major influence on Auntie Bibi.
Wow.
Wow. So you can see why she glorified her.
See, and that's one of the things that I love about this book is because when we look at our history is it's invigorating, but it's also layered, it's painful, it's all this mix of emotions for us. But when we read history, or at least for me, a lot of times I forget that people had lives and that racism did not consume every aspect of their life. They still lived lives. They still got married. They still had kids. They still had, get-togethers and played cards and all this kind of stuff. And that's what your book really kind of did for me. It showed these people that, that racism was a thing. Jim Crow was a thing. It was a very real part of their lives. But they also just lived life. They went to college. They had babies. They had,
family reunions and cookouts.
Color struck and family reunions and cookouts. And I just love that about your book because it shows that our life is not totally consumed by this thing. Like when it happens, we deal with it, but then we go on with the rest of our lives. And when it rears its ugly head again, then we deal with it again. But it's not like every day, every minute is spent.
Yeah.
Just dealing with this thing. And that's what you get to see here with BB and her life in this book. And I really love that.
I'm so glad. I love that you used the word invigorating. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very applicable, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, because it is invigorating. It's also infuriating. But
yes.
The fact that Black people exist here by sheer will, because slavery alone should have ended us and it didn't. Just the sheer will of people who were kidnapped and enslaved, just their sheer will to survive. That in itself is a miracle. And the fact that you and I are sitting here talking to each other is a miracle.
Yeah.
That is invigorating. The reason for it is infuriating. But the fact that Black people thrived, that your grandfather did all these things, that it's just...
Yeah,
how can
even
you
though
not
he was
be
a constant
invigorated by that?
target, he's still... because otherwise we get cancer, sugarfoot, and heart disease, and
Right.
that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do we not do that?
Exactly. Somebody denied him something, he started a business for it.
He was one creative problem solver, that is for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So what's next for you on the writing horizon, Jen?
So what's next is I'm going back to the theater for the moment. So I'm going to try and finish that Living Incognito piece.
Okay.
And that is just very much an examination of a lot of queries. So starting with what is it when your physical identity doesn't match your cultural identity, but also a whole lot of other things like what is it when you, let's say, thought that you had a multicultural background but didn't? What happens when you find out that you have more of a multicultural background than you thought, right? What is your birthright? Does that birthright have an expiration date? When does it become appropriation? But ultimately, I want it to be a love letter to younger generations, so that there can be more of that love-based fight happening and less of the othering, especially of the self. If when you're a small child, people, and you're saying to people what you were told to tell them when people say, "What are you?" Right? And then that gets negated. Right? Oh no, you're not this thing.
Right.
Right. Just helping, I just want to help. And then the other piece is about the Black suffragette Susie Clayton. Her father was one of the Black senators during Reconstruction.
Okay.
Fascinating individual. And she came out here to Washington to marry the person who started the main Black newspaper here, which was called The Republican. And it was read nationwide, it turns out.
Wow. Wow.
So I'm trying to, I've got 2 out of 3 acts that it's going to go around both to schools and to women's organizations. And I'm just trying to figure out Act 3 with that, seeing if there was anything that she did other than her writing. She was a prolific writer. Or if there's anything in the writing that I can hold up in particular dramatically, right? Because it's theater. So I'm looking for that one thing that makes people go, oh!
Right.
She did a ton of little things, right? And that actually is what moves the work forward. But I'm looking for the gasp. Yeah, so that's my quest right now, is to find out more about her. So that's what's going on with my writing currently.
Wow. Sounds amazing. So these are going to be plays.
These are going to be plays. That's right. That's right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I hope I get to see them.
I hope so
I really
too.
want to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have come to the end of our show. I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me, wanting to be on the show, and for being here, sharing your time, your talents, your family story with us. It's been a wonderful ride.
I agree. I thank you so much for hosting me. I love talking with you. You're remarkable.
Oh, well, thank you. So where can readers find your books?
Readers can find my book on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and it's an ebook right now, hardback, paperback, and the audiobook should be coming by the end of September, maybe even mid-September.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And where can we find you on the internet and social media?
Oh, gosh. There are no other Returning the Boneses. So go to Instagram, go to the Facebook. Just put in Returning the Bones, and I shall pop up. Yes.
All right.
Thank you for asking.
All right. Yeah. All right. And y'all know what time it is. At the end of every show, I leave you with a quote. And today it comes from the late, great James Baldwin, and he said, "History, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do. It could scarcely be otherwise, since it is to history that we owe our frames of reference, our identities, and our aspirations." Until next time, y'all, you know what to do. Grab a book and read, and I'm out. Thank you for lending me your ear today. If you've enjoyed this independent podcast, you can help me continue to shine the light on Black authors and their stories by becoming a patron at patreon.com/betweenthereads, or by giving a one-time gift at www.ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. That's ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. Tune in next time for another great episode.